Good evening, peasants, and welcome back inside the Palace Castle for yet another episode of Historia Mystoria. I am Professor Sponseller. I'm so glad that you could join us once again for some fun and gun learning. Now, today we're going to be taking a look, an in-depth look, at more of the early settlements, the early colonists and early colonizations. And today we're going to be studying the Quakers, the first religious tolerant people here in the New World. We're going to kind of compare and contrast them to some of the other groups that we've seen before. So sit back, grab you an Oreo cookie or two, and enjoy the learning as we do another episode here of Historia Mystoria. And welcome in, guys, and let's go ahead and get this lesson started as we begin to discuss the Quakers in the 1600s. Now we're going to examine the cause and the effects of the settlement of the Quakers here in America and exactly what made them so different than the rest of the colonies that we've looked at before. As you can see here behind me, we have a picture of the Quakers, the mascot of Pennsylvania. It quickly became, when the University of Pennsylvania was created, it gives you an idea of where the Quakers had pretty much set up shop. And we're talking about present-day Pennsylvania. So we're in the middle part of what we know as the United States on the East Coast. And that's where these Quakers, when they are coming over from England, are going to transplant themselves into. And so as you notice, we do have hearts on the background, and you'll get an idea of why that is at the end of the lesson. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is some of the laws that these Quakers had with them and the law of Pennsylvania here in 1683. We're going to take a look at Article 35, and I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to go over it step by step. And I want you to really soak in what makes this group of people different than those maybe per se the Puritans, which we're going to take a look at later on, and also people like the Separatists and the first people of Jamestown. It states that all persons living in this province who confess and acknowledge the one almighty and eternal God to be the creator, upholder, and ruler of the world, and that hold themselves obliged and conscious to live peaceably and justly in civil society, shall in no way be molested or prejudiced for their religious persuasion or practice in matters of faith and worship, nor shall they be compelled at any time to require or maintain any religious worship, place, or ministry whatever. Now, with some of these other places we talked about, especially when we get to the Puritans and when we talk about some of the other places that we've looked at here on Historia Mystoria, we know that religion is a key thing, that you were required. I mean, we go back to Jamestown and we go back to the Separatists. There were laws that said you were required to go to church. If you weren't, you could be fined or put in jail or made to work or do whatever. That's not the case here with the Quakers. You'll notice that if you just confessed and acknowledged that there was one almighty and eternal God, and that you hold yourself obliged and conscious to live peaceably, meaning that you're not going to be a violent person and you're not all for war and violence, and that you live justly in this society, then you could be in the place of Pennsylvania. Now, you didn't have to be a Quaker, but they're stating that you would not be molested, you would not be prejudiced towards if you came in and you were from a different religion. Or maybe you didn't have religion at all. You were still welcome in Pennsylvania under the Quakers. And so that's what that means here. That's what Article 35 is. It really shows us that they are the first tolerant people in regards to religion here in the New World. Now, if we move forward, if we talked about in that law, you can see that they are completely different people. They were Protestant reformers. They were trying to reform the Protestant church. Something like, we talked about the Church of England who tried to reform the Catholic Church, and they created the Church of England. And then we talked about the Separatists who were trying to reform. And we talked about the Puritans are going to be doing the same thing as well in our next lesson. They believed that all people were equal. Okay, we know that in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. Well, they believe this first. They're the ones who believe that no matter what your race, color, creed, religion, whatever it was, you were all equal. That's the way we were created. As the law also stated, you saw that it wanted people to live justly and live peacefully. Well, that also means that Quakers oppose all violence. As you can see here, the picture behind me says that they oppose all war, but they refused to serve in the army, and they opposed all warfare. Now you might be asking yourself, well, what happens if they get drafted? Well, it did happen. All right, World War II and other times where they did actually have to go to war. But luckily for them, most of them were not on the front lines. Most of them did not wield a gun. They would do certain jobs that we'll take a look at here later on in this lesson today. But you can see that they were completely against all violence. So they wanted nothing to do with war or any type of structured violence at all. One of the biggest stories about the Quakers, and you'll learn about this especially when you get into your civics classes, is in 1965 you had the big Tinker versus the Des Moines school district about their kind of going up against the Vietnam War. There was a Mary Beth Tinker wore an armband to school. She was eventually suspended because they said it was against the school rules, and it became a big First Amendment Supreme Court case that you're going to learn more about. Won't spend a lot of time with that, but understand, as you can see, that even the Quakerism has gone through the 1960s, even to present day, where they still oppose all types of violence and war. As I mentioned to you, they did fight. You can see here in World War II, here's a grave of a Quaker who fought during the war. Some of the jobs that these Quakers would have been doing would have been nurses or medics, maybe working with the mentally ill or mentally handicapped during World War II. Some of them would have been firefighters here at the home front, or maybe in certain places where war had already happened and they go and try and fix the issues that were happening. They would not have been on the front lines once again. Now, the Quakers might have been a very peaceful people, but they still came from England. And being in the New World, England felt like everyone should be paying taxes back to England here in the New World because England considered that one of their territories. And so the Quakers weren't against paying taxes, but they were refusing to pay taxes to the Church of England. Now, can you think of a reason why? If you really deep think, okay, have some deep thought, critically think, remember that they don't like violence and don't like war. But where do you think most of the taxes are going towards? They're going towards military expenses. And of course the Quakers understood this and knew this. And so they were very upset about how their money would be used. So they refused to pay taxes. And so they started this Peace Tax 7 movement, where they wanted to end the government's use of their tax money for military objectives. And instead, they wanted their money to go towards resolving conflicts, finding peaceful ways to end the war instead of trying to use violence. Well, of course, you can understand that the king and the church and stuff in England weren't too happy about this, and so the Quakers became persecuted in England. And many of those Quakers who were still living in England were pretty much shunned away and had to leave, and a lot of them came here to the New World and pretty much overpopulated the eastern side of what we know as Pennsylvania today. One of the first and most famous Quakers of all time, and she became really the first martyr that we can think of in regards to religious tolerance, is Mary Dyer. You can see the statue here behind me. She was hanged in 1660 in the Boston Commons for the fact that she was a Quaker witness for religious freedom. And so, as you can see, they were persecuted, they were hanged, they were fined, some were jailed. They were not a group of people that England was very happy with because they weren't paying taxes. Well, at the time, the king in England was King Charles II, and he made a man by the name of William Penn. Okay, he was the proprietor of some land in America, and eventually is naming it Pennsylvania, named it after him as well. Now, this is the charter behind me. It granted him this New World colony, and since all these Quakers were going there, of course, the king is going to, take this chance and try to make money out of it, obviously. And Penn's son, okay, which is William Penn, wants Pennsylvania to become this model of religious freedom. He wants the colony of Pennsylvania to be that colony that everybody else looks up to, so that anybody coming to the New World looks at Pennsylvania and says, that's what I want my colony to be like. That's where I want to live. That's what I want to have in my lifetime. And that was going to take a lot of work because you've already got a bunch of different religions in the New World. You've got the different one in Virginia, you've got the ones in Massachusetts, and now you've got the Quakerism in Pennsylvania. And so there are many obstacles in front of William Penn. Now, What's interesting, you might say, well, that guy looks really familiar. Yes, it's the guy on the Quaker Oats cans. Okay, obviously the Quaker Oats, oats being one of the major farming components in the middle colonies. We'll take a look at here in the next couple of lessons. So it gives you an idea of who William Penn and what his family was and what they did. Now, one thing we haven't talked a lot about here on Historia Mystoria is the story of the Indians. Remember that the Native Americans were pretty much here and owned a lot of this land, or excuse me, not owned, but they inhabited most of the land here. Now, William Penn, unlike a lot of the other white settlers who came to the New World, believed that if we were going to take this land, that we should purchase it from the Native Americans. And we shouldn't just take it with force. Again, that would be kind of against the whole Quakerism and violence idea. But the problem with this is Native Americans didn't really own the land. They felt that the land was given to them by their gods to live off of. And so the Native Americans obviously wouldn't have taken any money because they didn't feel like they owned it to begin with. And so there were still some tensions here between the Native Americans and the Quakers when the Quakers came in and took parts of Pennsylvania. Well, as I mentioned to you, because of the persecution, Pennsylvania became a very quick, quickly populated city, or in state, if we want to call it today, but it was in a colony at that time. The city of Pennsylvania, or city of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, okay, in 1701, and it actually became Pennsylvania's capital until 1799. But we'll talk more about that as we move forward into American history. But thousands upon thousands of Europeans moved to Pennsylvania. The city of brotherly love became its nickname, and it grew very quickly and became one of the largest cities in our early days here in the New World as we became a country, of course, getting closer and closer to the 1700s. Well, that'll about wrap up our show here today on the Quakers. Just a real quick study about who they are, and you can compare and contrast that to some of the others that we've taken a look at. Well, today I really hope you learned something about a group of people that most people don't understand a lot about, that they get ridiculed quite often. A lot of people kind of compare them to certain other groups that we have in our world today, but they are completely different when you sit down and take a look at them. Again, that'll wrap up the show for today. Hopefully you'll join in next time if we take a look at the Puritans, another group that are really going to populate the New World and really spread their beliefs and their ideas throughout. So once again, I'm Dwayne Sponseller, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us for Historia Mystoria. And until next time, don't forget, if you're not earning, you're not learning. Good night.